The divorce letter was there, resting in the center of her desk like a silent bomb about to explode. She could hardly believe her eyes. She tried to make sense of it, her vision blurred with surprise and anxiety that grew by the second. Her heart raced, her hands trembled. She looked around the room, almost as if she expected someone to come along and tell her that it was all a bad joke. But it wasn't. The paper was there, cold and official, ending the marriage of years with unprecedented brutality. Suddenly, his call came through, and she answered almost breathlessly, desperately seeking an explanation. "That's what you read." "Goodbye," he said, his voice cold and distant. The words cut like a sharp blade. It was the end. She tried to say something, but her mind was blank, unable to react, paralyzed by shock and the weight of everything it meant. She knew that he had found out everything, but she had never imagined that he would be capable of making such a ruthless decision. That night, her mind wandered between panic and a desperate attempt to understand how he had found out. Every detail of the betrayal came back to her, now wrapped in a blanket of guilt and regret. She remembered every message exchanged, every lie told, every lame excuse she had invented to disguise the meetings. She also remembered the way he looked at her before everything started to fall apart, with a genuine admiration and love that now seemed to belong to another life. How could she have thrown all that away? And, worse, how could he find out? That night, she almost couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, imagined the disappointment in his eyes when he found out what she had done. She tried to rationalize, she tried to justify it to herself, saying that there was a distance between them, that the marriage was wearing thin, that the routine was suffocating her, but deep down she knew that none of these excuses would erase the weight of the betrayal. There was no excuse for what she had done. The following days were a mixture of attempts at reconciliation and silent humiliation. Every message she sent him went unanswered, every call went straight to voicemail. He had completely excluded her from his life, and it was killing her. The pain of being ignored, of becoming irrelevant to someone who once meant everything to her, was unbearable. But the greatest humiliation was yet to come. A few days later, at a meeting with her lawyer, she discovered that she would be losing much more than just her husband. There was something she believed to be a secure asset, a valuable asset that meant as much to her as her own independence. But he, cunning and prepared, had everything planned so that she would leave the marriage empty-handed, losing that precious asset. The blow was calculated, a cold game of strategy and revenge, in which she was just one of the losing pieces. Still dazed, she tried to reason with the lawyer, but deep down she knew that any attempt to change his mind would be futile. He had been implacable, and nothing he could say or do would change that course. The image of her own decisions came back to haunt her, like scenes from a movie that kept repeating themselves. What now? She was on the verge of losing everything, and regret was no longer a relief for her conscience. As the pressure mounted, she found herself increasingly surrounded by memories of who she had been and everything she had destroyed on an impulse, for a fantasy that now seemed ridiculous and distant. She couldn't count on anyone's understanding. Shame was a weight she alone carried, and loneliness set in, taking over every empty space he had left in her life. In moments of weakness, she imagined that he could still give her one last chance, that he could somehow forgive her. "I know I made a mistake, but I really love you," she rehearsed in her mind. But she knew that this hope was as fragile as the paper she had signed, leaving her fate in the hands of someone she had hurt deeply. And now, perhaps, he too was silent, thinking about everything she had done, deciding how much more he could bear. At the end of the day, when she returned home, she found herself alone with her doubts and emptiness. He wasn't there, and the feeling of abandonment weighed on her shoulders like a burden she would never be able to get rid of. She looked around, every corner of the house seemed like a ghost from the past, reminding her of everything they had built together and which was now falling apart. But what tormented her most was the uncertainty. She wondered what else he knew, how far he would go to make sure she paid for everything she had done. And then the doubt began to eat away at her peace. He seemed so controlled, so calm in his coolness, that she couldn't predict what his next steps would be. There was something in the air, a tension she couldn't explain. A small part of her was beginning to fear that, in addition to the divorce, he had something else planned, one last blow that would leave her even more shattered. Something she might never have been able to predict, but which was there, waiting to be revealed. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support and never encourage any form of betrayal. The stories you're about to hear are fictional, but they bear a stark truth: betrayal is a path that destroys lives, hearts and trust. So get ready to dive into an intense narrative, where the consequences are real and the feelings are deep. Good story, and hold on, because this one will be shocking. In the silence of the early morning, Evan watched the landscape through the large window of his home office. His gaze lost in the horizon seemed to be a constant lately, a reflection of the thoughts that often occupied his mind. Evan was a discreet man, known for his tranquility and the commitment he always had to his family and work. His colleagues saw him as stable, centered and a safe haven for those around him. From an early age, he built a solid career in the financial sector, which allowed him and his wife, Mia, to live comfortably, without excess, but surrounded by everything they needed. Mia, his wife, was a charming woman. Charismatic and always elegant, she easily won the sympathy of those around her. She had a striking presence and a light-hearted manner that attracted everyone, a fascinating contrast to Evan's restrained serenity. The two formed a couple who, in the eyes of friends and family, were the perfect picture of stability and genuine affection. Married for over 15 years, they shared a life built on apparently solid foundations. Over time, they had learned to deal with the differences in their personalities, finding their own balance, a particular way of understanding each other without a word needing to be said. The house they shared was more than a home, it was a reflection of the choices and dreams they had nurtured together. Located in a quiet neighborhood, it housed memories of years shared, such as the birth of their daughter, Sophie, who now, at the age of 12, was beginning to experience the world with the curiosity of adolescence. Over the years, Evan and Mia's routine revolved around Sophie's needs and their work commitments, creating a dynamic that, although comfortable, seemed to become predictable over time. For Evan, this predictability was a comfort. He liked the security that routine provided. He would wake up early, leave for work in the city's financial center and return in the evening, where Mia would be waiting for him with dinner ready or, on quieter days, with a glass of wine in the backyard. The two of them would chat about the day, share light laughs and, from time to time, talk about the dreams they still wanted to fulfill together. But for Mia, the routine was beginning to take its toll. She felt that something was missing, a spark that used to make her vibrate with Evan. Lately, the marriage seemed to have lost some of its sparkle, the novelty of years ago. It wasn't a lack of love, she knew that, she still felt a deep affection for him, an admiration that is rarely seen in long relationships. But there was a restlessness in her heart, an inexplicable desire for something new, to feel again the chill in her belly and the intensity of an overwhelming passion. These were feelings she would never admit out loud, neither to Evan nor to herself. Mia's professional life had also changed. She worked as a marketing manager for a technology company, a position that required creativity and a vibrant personality, qualities she had always had in abundance. Her career provided her with independence and daily challenges, but at the same time it brought with it responsibilities that, from time to time, suffocated her. Lately, she felt torn between the demands of work and family duties. While Evan was content to maintain a rigid and organized routine, Mia was driven by impulses, by a constant desire to explore new paths and face different challenges. This difference between them was often the source of silent tension. Evan noticed Mia's restlessness, but believed it was just a reflection of the fatigue and stress of the job. He preferred not to question it, remaining supportive and avoiding getting into arguments that, in his opinion, would do no good. For him, Mia was a passionate, strong and independent woman, and he trusted that these qualities, which attracted him so much, would also be the foundation for overcoming any difficulties. Sophie, their daughter, was the link that kept the couple connected in the most delicate moments. A sweet and curious child, Sophie brought lightness to the home with her inquisitive questions about the world and the stories she loved to tell about her friends at school. Evan and Mia made an effort to be present in her life, despite their busy schedules and work demands. Sophie felt safe between them, and they both prided themselves on creating a supportive and loving environment. In those rare moments, when the three of them were together without a care in the world, the home would vibrate again, reminding them that, despite everything, there was still a connection there, something genuine and valuable. But they were scarce moments, increasingly stolen by the hustle and bustle of adult life and the responsibilities that weighed on Evan and Mia's shoulders. Saturday nights, however, were reserved just for them. They had established a tradition years ago of going out to dinner together, leaving Sophie with her grandmother or a trusted babysitter. These weekly get-togethers were a way of trying to keep the flame of their relationship burning, of reconnecting their conversations and remembering the moments that brought them together. Sitting in a restaurant they both loved, they shared a laugh and, for a few hours, forgot about their responsibilities. On one of these evenings, Evan noticed a different gleam in Mia's eye. She was lighter, her eyes seemed to sparkle as before, and her smile had a renewed energy that he hadn't seen for some time. He felt overwhelmed by a wave of joy and hope, believing that the effort to maintain this intimate routine was paying off. He held her hand, stroking it gently, as he had done in the early years of their marriage. "You look so beautiful tonight," he murmured, watching her with admiration. She smiled, looking away for a moment, as if that statement had taken her by surprise. "I think it's the company," she replied casually, but with a sparkle he recognized well. Over the next few days, Evan continued to notice this change in Mia. She was more engaging, more affectionate, and seemed to pay special attention to him and Sophie. He felt invigorated, as if the marriage was going through a phase of renewal, a rebirth that, for him, was a reflection of everything they had built together. While Evan sank into the peace that this return brought to his heart, Mia, for her part, felt torn. Deep down, she knew that there was something unresolved inside her, something that, even with the peaceful and loving moments at Evan's side, still throbbed in her chest. She was looking for an answer to this restlessness, a justification for the emptiness that inexplicably seemed to persist. She thought about talking to him about these feelings, about sharing her anguish, but she was afraid of hurting him. Evan was her safe haven, someone she trusted completely, and she knew he would never understand what was going on in her mind. So she preferred to keep her thoughts to herself, hiding them behind a smile. The balance between them, however, was fragile. Each new attempt to revive their passion seemed to strengthen Evan, while Mia found herself silently drifting further and further away from the relationship. What for him was a period of reconciliation, for her became a constant reminder of the choices she would have to make. Both had their eyes closed to the other's desires and fears, trapped in a dance that was becoming increasingly silent, although they both felt that, at some point, this superficial harmony would break down. As the days passed, Evan began to think about an even brighter future with Mia, perhaps with trips, moments that could renew and strengthen the marriage even more. He wanted to find a way to recapture the essence of their first years together, believing that, with love and patience, they would overcome any obstacle. He believed that Mia was by his side in this quest, that she felt the same way. Reality, however, seemed to be playing with their feelings, testing their limits and setting the scene for what was to follow. Evan felt that the harmony between him and Mia was growing. The last few weeks had been full of pleasant moments, spontaneous laughter and intimate conversations that he couldn't remember them sharing in a long time. There was a gentleness in Mia's gestures, a sparkle in her eyes that he noticed even in the smallest day-to-day interactions. At the end of each working day, he would return home with renewed hope that the marriage was finally entering a new cycle. And this filled him with a youthful, almost naive enthusiasm, as if he were reliving their first year of marriage. For him, the routine had become lighter. Nights with her had regained a warmth he had thought he had lost. In his mind, he was making new plans, planning trips, imagining new horizons that they could explore together. At work, his colleagues noticed the change in his behavior. Evan, always discreet and reserved, was now smiling in the corridors, with a lightness that was contagious. He felt that things were getting better, and this thought kept him optimistic and happier than he had allowed himself to feel for a long time. On the other side, Mia also seemed to be transforming. The easy smile and vibrant energy with which she faced the day made everyone around her notice the change. She was more present at work meetings, more motivated, and often mentioned in casual conversation how much she loved her family and how grateful she felt for everything she had built. But inside her, a tension was growing silently. Mia was experiencing a contradiction. On one side of her heart, there was genuine affection and gratitude for Evan and the life they had built together. On the other, there was a restless longing, a yearning for something she could neither control nor explain. Those days, there were times when Mia found herself sighing, absorbed in thoughts that she avoided sharing. Something new had invaded her life, something that secretly filled her with a sense of freshness and excitement that she hadn't felt for a long time. This new interest made her momentarily forget any dilemma, giving her an intensity that subtly but constantly pulled her away from Evan. Each time this thought invaded her mind, she forced herself to push him away, remembering everything Evan had been to her. But the more she tried to push these emotions away, the stronger they seemed to return. Evan, on the other hand, seemed blind to these changes. Totally wrapped up in the realization that the marriage was finally blossoming again, he couldn't see the subtleties in Mia's behavior, which were now more present than ever. He remained present and affectionate, believing that this phase of renewal was a reflection of all the love he felt. One weekend, he even suggested a trip to relive old memories, something he believed could bring them even closer together. Mia, however, hesitated, justifying it with work commitments and an important project that required her attention. As the days went by, this subtle distance between them began to grow, and Evan noticed that Mia was more absent, even when they were together. Saturday dinners, which used to be full of conversation and laughter, now became moments when she was absent in thought, distracted by something he couldn't identify. He watched her carefully, noticing little things that he missed, a distant look, a forced smile, a deep sigh. Something wasn't right, and a slight unease began to grow in his chest. One evening, after a long day at work, Evan came home a little later than usual. When he opened the door, he found the house silent. Mia wasn't in the living room, and Sophie had apparently already gone to bed. He went upstairs, opening the bedroom door slowly, and found Mia sitting on the edge of the bed, with her cell phone in her hands and a concentrated, almost tense expression on her face. Noticing his presence, she quickly blocked the screen and greeted him with a smile that, to him, sounded somewhat artificial. "You're late today," she commented, her voice soft but avoiding his direct gaze. "Yes, a few things at the office." "And you? How was your day?" he asked as he approached her. She mumbled a vague reply about work, looking away. Something inside him felt a small twinge of suspicion, but Evan pushed it aside, trying not to attach importance to a suspicion that seemed unfounded. But from that night on, something changed for Evan. He began to notice, more consciously, the times when Mia seemed distant, distracted by her cell phone, laughing alone at something he didn't know. A doubt began to form in his mind, a restlessness that he didn't want to feed, but which seemed to grow stronger every day. The following week, while Mia was out, he approached the dining table and saw that she had left her laptop open. He hesitated for a moment, feeling a mixture of guilt and curiosity. Evan had always been a discreet man, who respected Mia's space and had never invaded her privacy. But in that instant, something pushed him to come closer, almost as if it were a necessity. What he saw was enough to confirm the fears that were growing inside him. On the screen, an open conversation revealed messages that Mia had exchanged with someone in a very personal way. The content of the messages, although subtle, made it clear that there was more between them than a simple friendship. Evan closed the laptop with trembling hands, feeling his heart racing and a mixture of emotions ranging from shock to deep sadness. Over the next few days, Evan remained silent. He didn't mention anything to Mia, and she didn't seem to notice the change in his posture. But he couldn't help it. With every interaction, every smile she gave him, he wondered how much of the gesture was real and how much was just a facade. He began to observe her more carefully, trying to understand what had changed, trying to find some sign that would explain what he had discovered. Mia, for her part, seemed oblivious to Evan's internal conflict. She continued with her commitments, maintaining the same routine, but with a lightness and liveliness that now bothered him. He noticed that she seemed happier, more animated, and this happiness hurt him deeply, because he knew that he was not the source of this new glow. One morning, Evan decided to confront her. He woke up before Mia, went downstairs to the kitchen and stood there in silence, waiting for her to get up too. When she finally appeared, he watched her for a long moment before speaking, feeling the intensity of the hurt that consumed him. "We need to talk," he said, his voice deep. She seemed surprised by his tone, but moved closer, taking a seat at the table, waiting for him to continue. "I know," he began, looking her in the eye. "I know there's something going on, something you're not telling me." Mia stared at him for a moment, her eyes expressing a mixture of surprise and apprehension. At first, she tried to disguise it, playing down his words as if they were just unfounded insecurities. But as he held her gaze, she realized that she couldn't continue with that facade. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she muttered, looking away, as if the words were too hard to admit. Evan felt a knot forming in his throat. Everything he had feared was there, in front of him, in Mia's repentant expression. The impact of the betrayal hit him like a cold wave, leaving him breathless as her words resonated in his mind. The silence between Evan and Mia was palpable. Since the revelation of the betrayal, an unbearable tension had hung over the couple, turning every gesture and look into something dense, full of resentment and unspoken hurt. Evan felt like he was living with a stranger, someone he thought he knew, but who now seemed as distant and unattainable as the unknown. The nights became long and sleepless. He spent the hours reminiscing about their years together, trying to understand when things went astray. After a few days of cutting silence, Evan decided that he needed answers. He needed to know what else she was hiding, apart from the betrayal that was eating away at him. He could no longer hold back the avalanche of suspicions and questions that was taking over his mind. One evening, while they were both sitting in the living room, he decided to confront her. "Mia," he began, his voice laden with a seriousness that left no room for escape. "I need you to be honest. I already know about the betrayal, but I want you to tell me. What else are you hiding from me? I know there's something more. Ever since I found out, there's been a void, something you've been holding back. I can feel it." Mia lowered her head, unable to hold his gaze. She knew the moment had come. She knew that once she had revealed what she was about to say, there would be no turning back. She took a deep breath, trying to find the strength to utter the words that she held inside her with a deep fear, a fear that now dominated her entire being. "Evan. There is something, yes," she said hesitantly, her voice trembling. "I thought maybe you didn't need to know. That maybe it would be better for everyone if it never came to light." He stared at her, his eyes fixed and implacable, pressing her to continue. "Speak. I deserve to know the truth." She took another deep breath and, in a string of voices, let it out. "When we got married, do you remember that I worked for an investment company?" "Yes," he replied, confused by the direction the conversation had taken. Mia continued, her voice getting lower and lower, almost a whisper. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake back then, and it cost us more than you can imagine." Evan remained silent, waiting for her to explain what she meant. "I was in charge of managing an important account, one that involved millions of dollars. But I got distracted. I wasn't careful. I invested in a company without doing all the necessary checks, relying on promises and speculation. The company, of course, didn't make what we expected. In a matter of weeks, the amount invested had evaporated. When it all came to light, I was terrified. I knew I'd lose my job, that I could even be sued." Evan stared at her in shock, not knowing what to say. He had never suspected that she had made such a serious mistake in the past. "And why didn't you ever tell me this?" he asked, still trying to process the information. "Because I had to make a deal. I took some of the money we had to pay compensation, without you knowing. And to cover it up, I had to manipulate some information. You can't imagine how much of a burden that was for me. But I had to sort it out, I had to correct that mistake to save my job and our reputation." Mia's words felt like a punch to Evan's gut. It was as if each syllable pulled him further into a spiral of lies that he had never suspected existed. "And that was all?" he asked, the tone of his voice now a mixture of incredulity and restrained anger. "Or are there more secrets you haven't told me yet?" She hesitated, as if deciding internally what to reveal next. Finally, she looked at him with an expression that mixed pain and regret, and confessed, "No. It wasn't just that investment also had other consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Evan pressed. "That financial mistake led us to lose the right to a property, a house we bought as an investment. It was an asset that was in my name, and to cover part of the losses, I had to sign the property over to the company. I lost an important asset of ours, without you knowing." Evan's world seemed to fall apart. The physical betrayal had already destroyed his trust in her, but now, the magnitude of the financial betrayal, something that profoundly impacted the future and stability of the family, was an even more devastating blow. He felt betrayed in a way he could never have imagined. "So you lied to me all these years. You hid the fact that we were losing money, that you put our security at risk. And to top it all off, you had the nerve to go along with this farce. How can you look at me, knowing what you've done?" Mia began to cry, tears streaming down her face, but Evan felt no compassion. He was completely exhausted, overwhelmed by a mixture of anger, sadness and frustration that allowed him no room for forgiveness. "Evan, I did this to protect both of us. So that you wouldn't have to carry the weight of my mistake. I knew it would be hard to explain, that you would never understand. I just wanted things to go back to normal. But then, everything spiraled out of control." He took a deep breath, trying to contain the urge to scream, to break something, to run away. "Mia, there's nothing normal about stealing your own husband. There's nothing normal about living with someone as if they were a complete stranger, hiding lie after lie. I thought I knew you, that I knew who I was building my life with. But it seems that the person I married was just a mask." Mia's crying intensified, but Evan was no longer listening to her. The weight of the revelations was crushing him, making him question every memory, every moment, every gesture of affection they had exchanged over the years. After the confession, the silence between them became even thicker, almost tangible. Evan could barely look at Mia. It was as if she was falling apart in front of him, each layer of trust crumbling one by one, revealing a stranger with whom he had never imagined sharing his life. Her words still echoed in his mind, turning over everything he thought he knew about their marriage. Every memory, every shared decision, now seemed just part of a game in which he had unknowingly been manipulated. Over the next few days, Evan plunged into an automatic routine. He went out to work, interacted with people as usual, but inside, he was in pieces. Memories of the years of marriage came back to him like painful flashbacks, bringing with them the feeling that every moment was a lie or, at the very least, an incomplete truth. He tried to find signs, clues that could justify everything Mia had revealed, but nothing made sense. The betrayal of trust and the financial betrayal were intertwined in his mind, creating a mess that he didn't know how to clear up. Mia, on the other hand, tried in vain to make amends. She wrote messages, left notes, tried to start conversations in which Evan showed little or no interest. Her efforts at reconciliation were meticulously rejected. Evan would only respond monosyllabically when necessary, but most of the time his silence spoke louder than any discussion. There was an invisible barrier between them, a wall built by betrayal, which she now recognized was almost impossible to break down. A moral dilemma began to form inside Evan. Part of him felt an immense desire for revenge, to make Mia experience at least some of the pain he was feeling. However, another part, the one that still held memories of happy times, laughter and complicity, prevented him from acting impulsively. He wondered if he could simply throw away everything they had built. But at the same time, he wondered if a relationship could survive after such a deep and cruel blow. Doubt consumed him. One lonely night, he picked up a box of old photos of the couple, images that captured moments when he believed he was living a truth. As he looked at them, he noticed sincere smiles, affectionate hugs and a complicity that seemed indestructible. These memories tortured him, as he was faced with the reality that those moments were perhaps true only for him. Mia, on the other hand, had lived between secrets and lies. How could he be sure that her feelings were as genuine as his own? On an impulse, he picked up his cell phone and began to write her a long message. He wanted to expose his pain, to describe every fragment of the disappointment that was consuming him. But as he finished, he hesitated. Reading his own words made him realize how torn he was inside, and that no matter how much he tried to express himself, he would never be able to fully convey the weight of that betrayal. He gave up sending the message and deleted everything. Mia also carried a heavy burden. She knew she couldn't go back on the choices she had made, but the guilt was unbearable. Every look of contempt from Evan, every unspoken word, every gesture of indifference were like knives driven into a heart already weakened by guilt. In moments of despair, Mia wondered if she could ever be forgiven, if there was anything she could do to repair the damage done. But Evan was adamant, and deep down she knew that he might never be able to get over his disappointment. One night, after a week of cold, distant cohabitation, Mia decided she had to try one more time. She wanted to at least put into words the depth of her regret, even if it wouldn't change anything. She looked for Evan, who was sitting in the living room, his eyes fixed on the television screen, although it was clear that he wasn't paying attention to what he was watching. She approached, with a tired but determined expression, and sat down next to him. Evan, sensing her presence, looked away but didn't move. "I know you don't want to listen to me," she began, her voice shaking. "And I understand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve you to listen to me. But please, let me say a few things." He remained silent, expressing neither approval nor disapproval, but she interpreted the stillness as an opportunity to continue. I know I've destroyed you. That I ruined everything we built together with my lies. I can't forgive myself for what I did and, honestly, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that nothing I did was to hurt you. It was all the result of wrong choices, of weaknesses that I didn't know how to control. Evan finally faced her, his eyes full of sadness. "Mia, do you have any idea how much this has destroyed me? How blindly I believed in everything we had. You stole not only the money, but also all the trust, all the security I felt at your side." She nodded, struggling to hold back the tears, but knew that any answer would be insufficient. "I don't know how I'm going to get through this," he continued. "I don't know if I'll be able to move on, if I'll be able to forgive. I don't even know if I want to." Mia lowered her head, absorbing the pain in his words, aware that perhaps she was losing the man she had always loved, even if she had betrayed him in unforgivable ways. She wanted to say that she loved him, that she was deeply sorry, but she knew that those words wouldn't make a difference right now. After a long moment in silence, Evan got up and went to his room, leaving Mia alone in the living room. She felt the weight of her loneliness like never before, the pain of realizing that perhaps this was the definitive end to a story that had once been the center of her life. The next morning, when Mia woke up, she found an envelope on the kitchen table. It was a letter from Evan. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and began to read, her heart racing with the uncertainty of what he had to say. Evan's words were harsh, honest and devastating. He expressed all the pain he felt, all the disappointment, and made it clear that he didn't know if he could continue to be by her side. He talked about the impossibility of trusting again, about the chasm that now separated the two of them, and about the weight of all the choices she had made without consulting him, without giving him the chance to deal with the mistakes together. Evan ended the letter by saying that he needed some time, some space to process everything that had happened. He didn't know what their future would be, but he needed to be away, without the constant weight of lies and guilt that surrounded him in every corner of that house. He left without saying when, or even if, he would return. Mia read those words again and again, feeling the weight of the farewell between the lines. The anguish she felt deepened and, for the first time, she realized that what she had done had destroyed not only Evan's love, but also the love she felt for herself. The days following Evan's departure were a mixture of emptiness and reflection for Mia. The house, once full of shared memories and routines, now seemed cold, with a heavy silence that she herself had provoked. She spent hours going through the rooms, touching the objects that held memories of a life that, for her, was still there, but which was slowly disintegrating with each new morning. Evan, for his part, used the time away to reflect on what he still wanted for himself. In a secluded retreat, he rediscovered the silence and inner peace he had long lost. There, without distractions, he was able to confront himself and face what remained of his feelings for Mia. He couldn't deny that he still loved her, but the pain of betrayal was an impenetrable barrier that prevented him from even considering reconciliation. On the other hand, he couldn't see a future without her either. He was trapped between hurt and what remained of love, in a constant cycle of memories and contradictory feelings. As she reflected, Mia began to dedicate herself more to work, trying to fill the void with the only thing that was still under her control. However, the corporate environment, which had once brought her satisfaction, was now just a reminder of where everything began to crumble. The office walls seemed to squeeze her, every meeting and decision reminded her of her mistakes and the choices that led to that personal tragedy. Without Evan, work lost its meaning; without him, every professional achievement seemed bitter, empty. After a few months, Mia decided she needed to leave that house, that city. She moved into a modest apartment in a different area. She took only the essentials with her, leaving behind many of the objects that reminded her of happy times with Evan. It was an attempt to start again, but regret accompanied her in every new place she tried to make home. Evan, on the other hand, began to rebuild his life. Little by little, he returned to work, focusing on his personal goals and reconnecting with old friends whom, during the marriage, he had neglected. Over time, his pain turned into learning, and he found ways to move on. It wasn't a quick recovery, but he allowed himself to live one day at a time, without the pressure of erasing the past. After a year, the two met for the first time at a social event. It was an inevitable situation, as they shared many friends in common. Mia, visibly more reserved and serene, approached Evan with a slight smile, filled with a mixture of longing and pain. Evan watched her, feeling that, for the first time, anger didn't dominate his heart. There was a veiled respect between them, a mutual recognition that they had both lost something precious, but that, at the same time, they had survived. She broke the silence, saying, "Are you all right?" Evan nodded, feeling a weight lifted from his shoulders as he realized that, in fact, he was fine. "And you?" he asked, sincerely. "I've improved. I've been working on myself. Trying to understand why I did what I did," Mia replied, looking sad but honest. They both knew that this was the end, an acceptance that, although they still cared, their paths had parted forever. Evan realized that the love he had once felt for her was now a memory, a longing that no longer hurt him. Mia, for her part, understood that although she couldn't erase the past, she still had the power to rebuild her future, even without him by her side. The two said goodbye with a handshake, without any more words. They didn't need to. The end had been sealed. This story of Evan and Mia shows us how betrayal can erode the foundations of a relationship. And what about you? What did you think of this story? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, We always remind you that the consequences of betraying someone's trust can be devastating, and this channel does not support any kind of betrayal.